everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to the plenary panel for the 9th annual Dimensions of Political Ecology Conference. My name is Basama Cole-Quigley, and I am a first-year cultural anthropology PhD student here at the University of Kentucky. And I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for the evening. Tonight's panel, The Power of Erasure and Memory, Reimagining the Subjugation of Black Bodies, Spaces, and Places, will be moderated by Dr. Rosalind Harris, an Associate Professor in Community and Leadership Development at the University of Kentucky. Rosalind Harris grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in a family deeply involved in the civil rights and Black liberation movements of the 60s and 70s. However, it was her work in Hawaii within low-income communities with Native Hawaiians that helped her to develop an understanding of the deep connections between historical dispossession, oppression, and the fraying of ecological, social, economic, political, and cultural spiritual fabric of communities around the world. She is a social justice scholar focused primarily on food systems, food justice, race, and youth restorative justice in Kentucky. In this work, she collaborates with students and members of respective place-based communities. Her work is translocal, as she focuses on communities within the Black Belt South, the plantation slave belt, the greatest expanse of poverty within the United States. It is within the Black Belt that she works with a collective of community activists and folks from colleges and universities as they build bridges between one another in order to nurture creative community leaders and scholar activists who will address the impacts of dispossession oppression with critical insight, heart, and compassion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rosalind Harris.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful introduction, and thank you for guiding us and supporting us in such thoughtful ways, and Safoni and all the other members of your team who have put together such a spacious, beautiful conference for all of us. This is the 9th year of the Dimensions of Political Ecology Conference. And this is a really precious space, I believe, for all of us, where a space is actually open for us to have the time to process with each other deeply and to transgress. I'm particularly excited about our time together this year with scholar, activist, theorist, Priscilla McCutcheon, who gave us this thoughtful, profoundly thoughtful, insightful, and incisive introduction this afternoon. Tomorrow, we will hear a keynote address by Carolyn Finney, and I know she's going to throw down. She's going to get home. I am particularly excited to be a part of this panel with Dr. LaToya Eaves and Dr. hanna-garth and Dr. Rachel Watkins, who are dynamic scholars transgressing all over the place. So it is particularly exciting to be with them and to engage in the conversations that we will be engaging with this evening. The bottom line is that the lives of Black women have historically epitomized the double-sided power of erasure and memory. And this is something that we'll be delving into through the individual biographies of our panelists, but also, as Dr. McCutcheon talked about earlier, the intergenerational nature of that as well. In a few minutes, I will be introducing our panelists, but I wanted to say that right after the introduction, I'm going to provide a little bit of a centering breather time for all of us. We've all been very busy today, as I think we are most days. For some of you, you've flown in for this conference. So we're just going to take a little bit of time for centering and just being. But I'm going to introduce our panelists first. Dr. LaToya Eaves, all the way at the end, is an assistant professor in the Department of Global Studies and Human Geography and affiliated faculty with the Women's and Gender Studies program and the Africana Studies major at Middle Tennessee State University. Her work engages ideologies of race, place-based politics, and the discursive formation of the U.S. South and the Atlantic world. She is interested specifically in the interplay of these three ideas from the positionality of queer Black women. She is also the founder and chair of the Black Geography Specialty Group of the American Association of Geographers. The Geography Specialty Group is a liberatory project that foregrounds Black geographies and the Black experience, and attempts to hold geography accountable for its exclusions, inclusions of Black geographies and Black geographers. And at this year's American Association of Geographers Conference, Dr. Eaves will be the recipient of the Ron F. Abler Distinguished Service Honors in honor of the transformative impact she has had on the organization through her commitment to Black geographies. And right next to me is Dr. hanna-garth. Hanna is an assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology at the University of California, San Diego. Dr. Garth is a sociocultural and medical anthropologist specializing in the anthropology of food. Her work addresses issues of inequality and structural violence with regional interest in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the United States. She currently has active research projects in Cuba, in Los Angeles. In Cuba, she has conducted research on household food acquisition practices and the changing Cuban food system. And in Los Angeles, she has been researching the food justice movement and the organizations that work toward increasing healthy food access in low-income areas. Both projects address issues of race and gender-based inequality. So, and in the middle, we have Dr. Rachel Watkins. Dr. Rachel Watkins is an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology at American University in Washington, D.C., where she specializes in biological anthropology. Her research focuses on the biological and social history of African Americans living in the 19th and 20th centuries in urban U.S. She studies the health consequences of poverty and inequality through skeletal and documentary data analysis. The focus on the W. Montague Cobb Skeletal Collection, which is an anatomical collection made up of D.C. residents who died in the city between 1930 and 1969. Her current research and writing focuses on the use of African American skeletal remains and living bodies in the development of bioanthropological practices and racial formations. So welcome, Dr. Rachel. So I'm just going to ask you you can stand or sit, but I'd just like to ask you to stretch in any way that makes you feel comfortable, gives your body a little bit of a energetic pick me up now. And as you take your seats, I'd like to ask you to actually take your seats, to be as fully in your bodies, be as fully present in your bodies as possible. They call a lot of us absent-minded professors. I think for the most part we're really absent-bodied professors. So take your seats, be in your bodies, and just rest, relax in your bodies for this moment together, for us to process deeply. And moving through from your toes to the very top of your head, any places of tension, just let them relax. Instead of thinking backwards or forwards about anything that's bothersome or anxiety-producing, just return to being present in your body and in this space. And then take the time to take some deep in-breaths, a couple of deep in-breaths and out-breaths. And as you're centered in this space, I'd like you to think through your day, from Dr. McCutcheon's opening address to the sessions that you have participated in throughout the day, and get a sense of any questions in particular that are bubbling up for you, particularly in relationship to the topic going into our discussion for this evening. And I'd like you to turn to someone close by, and I'd like you to just introduce yourself, share your name, where you're from, and the question that's bubbled up. If one has not bubbled up, don't worry about it. But just connecting in this way helps us to generate the energy which will help us to have a virtual circle of energy, even if we are not really in a circle in this space. So if you would do that, just take a moment, introduce yourself to someone. I am going to just ask a few questions. Really, this time belongs to all of us. I myself am really interested in the stories from these three dynamic women that I'm sitting with. I'm going to ask questions that are kind of canned, just because I have to contain them for the sake of time. So I'm going to be reading them out. Your works are very different. You're coming from different spaces, different places in your work. However, your works intersect where the material sites of being, interactions, and memories of Black bodies are erased, or the historical composition of their very own life world stories are reinscribed with fatal distortions. Describe how your own biographies brought you to your unfolding body of work, and then describe how your own biographies served you in reimagining the potential for memory, agency, and possibility. So, we didn't draw straws.
I have slides, so I'll go first.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yes. And I put together some slides because I'm entering that like age cohort professorial bracket where I'll start speaking too long, so it's just So kind of going back to Dr. McCutcheon's, one of her important questions this afternoon, where does this knowledge come from? Where does knowledge come from? This is my lineage of sorts. So I can say to that question, one of the things that popped up for me is if I hadn't gone to Howard University, which is a historically black college, I probably wouldn't be majoring in anthropology because there was a particular, very non-canonical, very inclusive way that I was introduced to anthropology, and not only in terms of the importance of scholars of color and how they've contributed to the discipline, and specifically bioanthropology, but also in terms of the interdisciplinarity that African descendant scholars have brought to bioanthropology. And so the picture up there is of William Montague Cobb, for those of you who don't know, who was the first African American to receive a doctorate in biological anthropology at Case Western Reserve. He studied with T1 Gay Todd there. And he came back to Howard and actually put together an anatomical collection that mirrored the one that he studied at Case Western, and he kind of used it as a jumping off point to allow African Americans to engage in these discussions and debates about racial science and racial difference. So a lot of very important intellectual and political work going on from the very beginning. And it's also important to note that his research and his work was not simply about resistance and naming injustice and resistance to it, but he also was very much so a part of the cohort of bioanthropologists at the time, conferring with one another, right? He as a black man conferring with very prominent people in the field. They're working together, exchanging ideas, generating new ideas and approaches for research. So that's something important to keep in mind as well. Fast forward, after Cobb retires, the skeletal collection actually goes into the basement of Howard University's medical school. Right around the time I get to Howard, the skeletal collection was being brought up out of the medical school, and there was a bioanthropology laboratory established in Howard where the remains would be housed and be available for research. Right around the time we were finishing the curation of the Cobb collection, we cannot say it was discovered, an African burial ground in Lower Manhattan was unearthed. And through a lot of political activity and things, those remains ended up coming to Howard. So I worked on that project as well. So that's why I have up there that over 250 years of African descendant biohistory and social history was housed in the laboratory, and a lot of intellectual and political work around it. One of the key things that came out of the New York African Burial Ground Project and the activity of the descendant community was this ethical epistemology. So that's a fancy term for knowledge development that is community driven. So in other words, the scholars who were putting together the research design for this project didn't leave it up to themselves to do it and then check in with the community. The community actually played an important role, a key role, in generating the questions. They're responsible for the diasporic focus. They even had a say, or really more than a say, in how we actually assembled skeletal remains in the laboratory. And so what's interesting, however, is that for all of the discussion about ethics in bioanthropology and bioarchaeology and what to do, how can we be more ethical in terms of our research practices, the ethical epistemology from the burial ground is hardly ever, if at all, mentioned. And this goes hand in hand with this kind of general continued dearth of people of color in bioanthropology. I think when I finished, I was maybe 15th or 20th African American between Cobb got his doctorate in 1932. So that's ridiculous. So having had my introduction to anthropology and being able to work on these projects at Howard really helped me to kind of understand from the very beginning the importance of being able to bring one's whole self to research. And I certainly, the space was certainly there in the laboratory and at Howard for me to bring my black self to bioanthropology, my black self. However, there are not very many women, certainly not very many African American women in bioanthropology, so there were other really important aspects of myself that I wasn't able to bring to the table. And so my project now is really not so much working on skeletal remains, but really kind of working on and working through the way we engage in this research in ways that can make it more liberatory and bring more people of color into the field. And one of the things that's central to that is this idea that we as bioanthropologists really pride ourselves on critiquing scientific racism, right? There are some of us who play a really important role in all of the race and genetic ancestry testing discussions. However, that's something that is very different from critiquing structural racism and inequalities in the field, which has everything to do with the continued dearth of people of color as knowledge producers. Now, when you talk about people of color being research subjects, we don't have any problem there. There's plenty of us, right? But we get to be in the shelves, we get to be in the cabinets, but we don't get to be at the table. And so, my project really is around exposing these epistemological underpinnings that continue to allow for and that produce and reproduce these normative intellectual terrains. And I believe that very central to that is the examination of scientists as social actors and exploring the histories of our social relations and how that informs the social relations that take place in the laboratory today, such that you can continue to have more people of color participating as research subjects than knowledge producers. And one of the ways in which I'm contributing to that is by using Black feminist theory, Black feminist critiques of science in particular, to take this on. And so that's where my intersection, if you will, with geography comes in, because Catherine McKittrick's work and her work focused on Sylvia Wynter has been very influential in terms of me developing frameworks to look at how it is we continue to engage in research that is extremely normative in terms of race and gender and sexuality and class. There's really not much space for us. I think, is that the last one? Yep, that's it. That's it. I'm done. Oh, yes, so if I have time, do I have time?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so these are a couple of quotes that kind of guide the research that I'm doing now. And you see that this quote speaks to this foreclosure of interdisciplinarity and the ways in which, these very modernist ways that disciplines are compartmentalized that get in the way of these really important analytical approaches that kind of take on the intersections of race, science, knowledge, and power that are really important. So that's one quote. And then the second quote, which speaks to me more directly, is from Patricia Hill Collins, who in 2015 in a paper of hers said that, there should be some scientific insiders who actually take on these questions regarding the epistemological underpinnings of science. And that actually was quite a wake-up call for me, because we all kind of think, again, speaking to that compartmentalization, that you're to stay in your lane. But there's a particular knowledge, not only as a Black feminist identified woman that I bring to the table that assists with analyses, but also as a scientist. And so that's who I am, and that's what I'm doing now. Oh, let me show that last one. So this is actually more of my, a more esoteric version of my autobiography. Here, that's the preschool, kindergarten, etc. You see the full life cycle of Black girls' hair here, the cornrows, the afro pop, etc. Now I have the locks. And this is something that I show to children. I speak to a lot of school kids about anthropology as part of the project of bringing more people of color into the field. So the deal with this is this. So when I was in graduate school, I'm sure many of you can identify, there always comes a point, or often comes a point, where you say, I'm out of here. I'm like, done, I'm not finishing. And so I, came to my day, made my declaration. Of course, you call your friends first, because they're like, yeah, yeah, girl, yes. Then once you get your courage up, then you call your parents. So I called my mother, and I said, listen, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore, blah, 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 blah. She doesn't say anything. And she says, do you remember the Sunshine Family? That's the Sunshine Family. These really creepy dolls that they had in the kids in the 70s. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you know what, one day, like so many days, you were getting on my nerves. I threw you in the tub with your Sunshine Family dolls in a bubble bath. Don't call Child Protective Services, I can swim with the sun. But she said, I threw you in that tub with those Sunshine Family dolls. And when I came back in to check on you, there was Sunshine Family arms and legs and torsos, all just floating around the tub, right? And my mother is extremely religious. So, think about it. She's thinking like I'm possessed or something. And she said, Rachel, why did you do that to the Sunshine Family? And she said that I looked up at her and I said, because I wanted to see what was on the inside. So she shared this story with me. She said, so listen, you have wanted to see what was on the inside from the time you were 4 years old, so please get off the phone and turn your tail around and go back to class. And I said, okay, and that's why I'm here.
Dr. Eaves, I think there's a deep insight to your work as well. So if you share with us your story and its connection with the unfolding of your work.
Sure. First of all, thanks everybody for being here and engaging in this conversation this year. As Priscilla pointed out earlier, the day gets blacker and the talks get blacker. And so I have come from a different kind of standpoint. But of course, I think we overlap, Priscilla overlaps, and Carolyn will certainly overlap tomorrow. And I have to thank Saponi, who there was a point where I was on a group message with two people that are in this room that I'm not going to name. And I said, yo, all the speakers are Black women. Holy God. Because one of the things that has happened for a very long time is that the recognition of what Black women have been doing within geography and elsewhere has been terribly, terribly dismissed and erased and not given tenure. So, yeah, I was talking about Carol. Among many others, like that. So, I co-edited with Adam Bledsoe and Brian Williams this Black Geographies in and of the U.S. Southeast, which Rosalind and Heather, is that still here? Hey, Heather, have an essay and included. But one of the things that we did as we were covering kind of the lineage is that it's heavily gendered until you get to Catholic. But there's a long history of Black women doing a lot of intellectual production that should be recognized. And so I appreciate Saponi and everyone else who's been involved with this planning and organizing this event for giving that space. And so how I got to where I am now it starts in Shelby, North Carolina, in a way, which is where I was born and raised. But I'm going to go back to Shelby in a bit, but I'm going to start in Miami, which is where I got my PhD. And this is the site where I came to know something called Black geographies. I had a term, finally, for what I wanted to work with. And it came to me right at the time when I needed it most, as I was sitting in my house in the neighborhood called Little Haiti, around people who spoke a language I didn't, and and I shared a backyard with my mango tree, and the Haitian Catholic Church, which is situated on Northeast 62nd and Northeast 62nd Street and Northeast 2nd Avenue in Miami, which is currently those folks that will be pushed out very shortly by the Linwood Art District. In any case, that everybody raves about, we're going to push people out. But that's another story. So, but every year, the Haitian church had a revival, which I thought Catholic people having a revival was the most interesting thing. As a Baptist, and also like knowing a little bit about Catholics, I was like, oh, like a revival doesn't sound like what Catholics do. But I would come home from FIU and hoping that I had a parking spot in my driveway, because as I learned, living in that neighborhood, and as I learned to frame my work within Black geographies, the house I shared, the house that I lived in was shared land. It was communal, and I had no authority to possess it. And I think that's at the crux of what Black geographies, Black studies, and that kind of epistemological framework. It's important to understand that I get a lot of recognition for stuff about Black geographies, but it never belongs to me. It belongs to people and to the land. So I just want to make that point first. So I would go home after class, these nice graduate seminars that we have, and I would sit on my balcony in the backyard and watch them march in a circle around the land that their church was situated on. They had no idea what they were saying, so I can't speak a lick of Creole, and hundreds of people singing collectively, invoking every ancestor, spirit, and God deep into the night, well after midnight sometimes. So theirs was not the only ritual I came to know in Little Haiti, but it was certainly significant as my work gained its origins and its footing while I was at FIU. And it was at that house with the church in my backyard, the ladies in white walking down the street, doing other rituals, that I Googled Black geographies. And by chance, I found Black Geographies and Politics of Place, which is edited volume from Clyde Woods and Catherine McKittrick in 2007 from In Between the Line Press. You can buy it directly from In Between the Line Press. If you go on Amazon, I'll say it's $300. It's not, it's about $35. You order it from the people in Toronto. I also discovered Development Arrested, Clyde Woods' book from 1988, and Demonic Grounds, which has been evoked a couple of times, and I ordered all three ASAP. At that time, Clyde's book was out of print, and so mine was a used book from Shaker Heights Public Library. Anybody from Cleveland? My girlfriend at the time was from Cleveland. She had a ball. She was like, Shaker Heights. So I was like, all right. But, you know, so anyway. And then within a few days, I learned that Clyde had passed away. And I often wonder what he's like. And Priscilla, like I listen to Priscilla's couple of stories every now and then about like what Clyde was like, the AAG and things like that. And I've carried them around quite a bit. And so it's spending that summer engaging that work that brought me back to the U.S. South. I think that when you're in graduate school, people just kind of expect you to study something exoticized and other and outside of yourself. And sometimes I was like, why didn't I study, I don't know, Trinidad and Tobago? I don't know, because there's an idea that if you are within the community, then you have no idea no way to be objective, and you cannot speak to it fully and that kind of thing. Or if there's something that resonates with you, then you can't be separated from it. I have no idea what I'm doing at the time, but I'm going to keep talking. So, but I focus on the South. I grew up in a house in Shelby, North Carolina, which is a small town on the North Carolina-South Carolina border, about 40 minutes from Charlotte. It's now kind of ex-urban Charlotte metro, but it's on the way to Asheville, if you ever go to Asheville. So I'm kind of situated in the middle. I grew up in a house there that's no longer there because the city tore down, because the owners of the house that we rented growing up just didn't care about it anymore, so they just left alone, the city tore it down. And so I used to hang out and play in the yard. I made mud pies and ate them with my sister from North Carolina's Red Theater. How much time? 4? Okay. All right. So, and drank water from the spigot in the front yard. And all of this is very unlike Miami. If you've been to Miami, it's nothing but concrete and water. So, and some mango juice and avocado. But anyway, so all of that to say, my work is inflected by religious and spiritual practices that came kind of out of those experiences of Southernness and queerness as well. As I moved through like creating, you know, like trying to work towards a world that I saw that was that did justice to the things that became important to me. The thing I struggled with when I was in graduate school was trying to make sure my mother could understand what I was talking about. And so I would talk with her regularly so that she could engage with the language. My mother went to what was called Cleveland School, which was at one point when schools integrated across the South, much, you know, like well after 1955. It devastated the Southern landscape, and I don't think people really understand what that did to communities, to the teachers that were like the leaders of that, and all those kinds of things. But after integration, my mother completely flailed because the system that she was put into was not set up for her success. It was meant for white kids in our town. And so I spent a lot of time with my mom talking through my work so that I could like try to make sure that I could communicate it with a broader audience, which I think is really, really important. And I can talk more about that later. But how Black geographies came to be. So then so after, you know, like Googling Black geographies one summer and being like, oh my gosh, who are these amazing people that I had no idea existed, who came to me, you know, like the word came to me right when I needed it. I didn't want other people to have the experience. And so like every opportunity I got, I like did something about like heralding or like creating the space for us to have a conversation about what Black geographies meant. And so I've done that through the AEG and everything has exploded from there. So that's fantastic. And one day somebody was like, I heard there was a list there. And I was like, nope, but I'll make one. And somebody was like, I heard this happened. I was like, oh no, but I'll do it. And somehow or another we accumulated people and, you know, that one day I got a phone call that said, so we're going to make Black geographies a featured theme at the AEG, so you have to chair it, you need to write a description and pick a committee and like all these things. I was like, oh, okay. But I am proud of like the way that these people are starting to get their flowers and their work is getting elevated. We're having these different conversations and changing the landscape of who produces knowledge and who's centered and that kind of thing. Part of like how I came into the work though was also anger. I was frustrated and angry with people and their ideas of what Blackness meant, and trying to tokenize me and telling me that people treated me special, and that must be how I got to where I am. But I can talk about that some other time. But now I'm at a wonderful institution at Middle Tennessee State University, where I'm very happy. You know, I was able to help co-found the geography department and at an institution that's really about public engagement and not necessarily about accumulating intellectual production. And so I appreciate, or a traditional kind of intellectual accumulation. So I appreciate having the opportunity to be publicly engaged almost at all times with students, most of whom are first generation. Our university is about 20,000, which most people, you know, realize. It's a very large institution meant to serve the Middle Tennessee area, kind of regionally and beyond. So, and I'm fortunate that my institution has supported literally everything I've ever done. And I think that's not everybody's experience. I have a very supportive administrative staff and people who trust me and that kind of thing. And so all of that has contributed to how I ended up where I am now and how I've been able to like create the spaces that I thought were, you know, that seemed to me were really, that people were really hungry for. So.
Thank you. Anna, your work comes from a really rich cultural Chicago, Cuba, US, Los Angeles So if you could tell us your story connected to the unfolding of your work.
Okay. Well, there's a number of different ways to sort of enter into the story. And so I've been thinking about the different ways to bring it in. Well, one of the things that, so I, like probably many people in the room, come from a family of farmers. One side of my family were sharecroppers who eventually came to own their own farm, eventually lost their farm. Another side of my family owned their own farm and then lost their farm. I personally was never connected to farming. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, in the city. We didn't have a farm. But hearing the narratives of my grandparents and my parents and understanding the loss of livelihood, the loss of land, the loss of what people had connected with their identity for generations was really impactful on me. So even though I was never connected to farming personally, felt a sort of deep disconnect not having it, given that it was part of this narrative. I also grew up as one of very few Black families in a majority white town in Wisconsin. And that there was another sense of disconnect there in that I never felt like it was my community. I never felt connected to it or welcome there. I mean, I still don't feel welcome there. So between those two, between feeling sort of disconnected from a long family narrative and not connected to the place in which I lived and grew up, I spent, I think, my whole life kind of struggling to find something that was important to me and something that mattered to me. And food, through gardening and farming and food consumption, sort of became that thing for me. It became a vocational interest. And so as I was interested as an undergraduate, I got a master's in public health that was focused in nutrition, and I implemented a nutrition program in the Philippines. And I went on to continue working in food. I became interested in working on food in Cuba due largely to the literature that probably many of you are familiar with about Cuba's agroecology programming. So there's a lot of work showcasing how wonderful Cuba's urban agriculture programs are, community gardens, their ability to sustainably grow food for a population there. And like the good scholar that I was, I derived a set of research questions out of this literature that I had been steeped in. But when I arrived in Cuba, and so I, as an anthropologist, had this idea that I should talk to regular people, not experts in agroecology. So rather than sort of seeking out these types of people, I started talking to regular people, not people associated with urban gardening. And what I found really early on was that anyone that was Black would tell me that they were completely uninterested in any of this, in organic food, in urban gardening, in agroecology, that it was not for them, it was not of them. There were a number of people who stressed me to change who I was talking to, right? So to talk to the agroecology people, talk to people involved in these gardens. And there were other institutional pushes. Some people told me that it was more normative to study cultural practices if I was interested in talking to Black Cubans, so that I should shift my focus to dance or music or ritual. And that was told to me both by people in the United States and by people in Cuba. But both of those narratives of how to shift the focus of my research didn't really sit well with me. So I kept talking to Black people. What I found was that, well, a particular person named Regina really made it clear to me. What she said was that if you care about life in Cuba, just come and hang out with us and see what we're living and what we're going through. And so one of the things that she really wanted to do was to showcase how she was able to work with the ingredients that she had that were available to her, and to create something that was delicious and connected to her sense of traditional Cuban food. And her narrative then resonated back with stories that I was familiar with my own family's desire to be able to create palatable, delicious food out of the few ingredients. We have more access to ingredients than they did, but I come from a low-income family that also struggled with creating food that was something to be proud of, something to be shared with others. So I decided to focus my research in Cuba on that story and to look at family after family after family and see how they were putting together these meals. And what I found in spending a lot of time with them was that they're doing a lot of work to theorize some really fundamental questions of the social sciences and of philosophy, which is what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to have dignity and decency? What are the kinds of things that we should strive for and pursue as people, as ethical people, as moral people? Those are their words. And so over time, I've developed a project that really centers their voices to show how they are advocating for a particular kind of food system and way of living that resonates with their understanding of what it means to be good people and live a good life. And this, in the end, has nothing to do with the literature that I was reading. It really has nothing to do with Cuba's agroecology programs. And so I've spent time thinking about how to make sure that people who are scholars of food still understand that these narratives are important and should be centered just as much as people that are also doing the important work of showcasing Cuba's organic farming movement. So I also could talk about how I came to work in Cuba, but maybe I'll leave that for the Q&A.
We're talking about stories that have emerged in very different ways, through bones, through the experiences of your family, through the spaces that you lived in and then eventually moved into framing as Black geographies. I have some other questions, but I really am feeling the energy to open this up to you folks at this point. I feel so much has been shared, and if we need to take up some of the other questions, we will. So, how about it, folks? Any questions at this point? Any shared stories? Right here.
Can you tell us how you did it? Can you just discover that you're floating? I am curious.
So the question is, since I offered it as a question for the Q&A, how did I end up working in Cuba? So again, my family history, people traveled a lot, right? So I have a lot of narratives of people.
Do you have an extra pen?
traveling and discovering themselves. In particular, my grandmother went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and discovered many things about herself. My grandparents on the other side lived in Ethiopia for a really long time. And so I, again, absorbed these sort of narratives of travel as self-discovery, and it was sort of like I could choose anywhere to go in the world, and the first place that I decided to travel to was Cuba. I don't really know why. It was one of those moments where it just was something that I chose. And my grandmother, who was alive at the time, had made it into this story of like, you were meant to go there. I don't buy into this sort of magical, romanticized narrative. But I will say that once I was traveling in Cuba, one of the things that I realized was the ways in which I was racialized in Cuba had a really profound experience on how I understood the ways in which I had been racialized my whole life in the United States. And so there was a process of coming to understand racialization and difference in Cuba, which is not a perfect place with no racism either, that made me sort of understand the ways that hierarchies of white supremacy and dominance had really shaped me as a person and an intellectual. So I traveled to other places and did research in other places, but it was something about that experience of racialization for me that kept me coming back there, even though I don't have any familial connections to Ireland.
Thank you.
Somebody else?
Yeah, right.
Go ahead. Go.
Sure.
No.
I mean, just shout it, or?
You.
No.
Should we battle it out?
Come on, Manal, let's go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for sharing your stories. It brings to mind a question for me that something that I struggle with is how to kind of balance embodiness and situatedness and personal narrative in academic writing, because I feel like even in a lot of feminist writing, it's the embodied experiences still seem to be kind of left to the methodologies section, so to speak, instead of an actually sort of looking at how it fundamentally shapes the research findings themselves. And so I'm curious how you all think about that in your academic writing.
Yeah, I in part came to the work that I'm doing now because of anger. Because there are so few of us in biological anthropology, I often get these invitations to be a part of the edit to this special issue as the token. And it's very clear to me, based on the way things are structured in my subdiscipline, that people think, oh, you go to the same few people of color and you're fine. You're doing right, as opposed to increasing the numbers. And this, a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, I received an invitation to participate in this issue, the special issue on historical bioarchaeology or something. And it was supposed to be focused on new approaches and new ways of doing bioarchaeology. And I actually became like paralyzed with anger. I was like, I just could not bring myself to write. I mean, I was literally in my body immobilized. I couldn't think, I literally could not write. And I had to kind of work through why that was the case. Right? And it was because I realized I was so tired of being a part of reproducing this kind of racialized intellectual landscape where it's perfectly okay to keep the 2 or 3 of us, out here and there, and not to try to bring in any others. And from that anger, I literally, I was just like a total knot of anger. From that anger, new directions or developing new methodological and theoretical approaches when there are a whole bunch of methodological and theoretical approaches that have been ignored. And we're talking about new directions and all of this stuff without looking at the social relations of the discipline. And so that's really what informed the work that I'm doing now, the theory that I draw on, and really everything that I do, even in terms of community service, to bring more people of color to the field. So it was that anchor. So, I mean, that's very much so. I mean, it has everything to do with what I do. And I did write about it in the paper, right? And I got bad, reviewers who were not trying to hear that. I said, I'm not, as a bioanthropologist, put a position statement in your paper, in the book long. But I had people who were allies who vouched and said, no, we're not published.
Yeah, I was basically saying that part of it, which is to say that I've tried to assert things about positionality into articles, and again reviewers say that they must be omitted or removed or relegated to a footnote or one sentence in the method section. But on the flip side, I've been getting an increasing number of reviewers who stress that I articulate my positionality, meaning like what is my race and ethnicity. And I feel also, I have complicated feelings about that too, because I wonder if they're asking that all authors assert their positionality. Does every single person that they review for have to say who they are, where they come from, and how they're able to access the research? So I think that it's not always a simple thing of like being able to sometimes assert how our embodied experience matters and sometimes not have to, but it's more of a systematic issue of looking at who is having to do this, when are they having to do this, and why.
Carolyn, you had a question?
I did. I have lots, but I have one. Thank you, first of all, to all the doctors up there. This kind of follows on Manon's question, actually, and some of the responses a little bit. So, Rachel, I loved one of your comments. You said we get to be on the shelves and in the cabinets, but not at the table. And so I actually wanted to take this for everyone in terms of whether thinking about it literally or thinking about it as a metaphor. Where is the place you feel you're at the table? Where is the place you don't feel you're at the table? And what do you see as changing? And what do you see that's not?
Why would you ask a question like that? It does. These questions are related. When I wrote my dissertation, there were very few white people in it. I made a point to do that. Most of it was Black feminist work, even though I was publishing in geography, and it kind of went on from there. And I think that one of the things that we were talking about, I can't remember which day, if it was this morning, or if it was yesterday, because time-space compression right now, but was about who can, what was related to the social relations part. One of the things that helped me out was that Hilda Kurtz, who's outgoing co-editor of Southeastern Geographer, is absolutely amazing and was so willing to work with where I was and the kind of framework I wanted to put into the essay that I wrote a couple of years ago. And recognized that I had a creative background and I had a very specific framework that I was coming from, and wanted to work alongside with me to help me communicate that better, but still do justice to the kind of work I wanted to produce and what I wanted to say. So I think that we talked about editor relationships at some point that I can't remember. And I think that was, you know, like the people like Nick Heinen, where he's at here, you know, like people who have that kind of editorial knowledge, Natalie Osmond at Society and Space, and, you know, Catherine at Antcode, like I think there are people that that if we reach out to and say, this is like where I'm coming from, then that's, you know, like how can I like balance this out better, you know, so that we can still like, you know, like achieve all the goals. And I think that the dang it, it just left. But I'm going to come back to you. But oh, that's what I was going to say. I think that it's really hard, and I've talked about this a lot here lately, that there are, you know, a lot of structures that people are just like, no matter what they say or like, you know, like what they pronounce as their like framework or approach to something, it's really hard to like try to resist something, but also still like, I found that a lot of people, like feminist geographers, they still like reproduce the system that they're talking about, that they're combating, and I think that it takes a lot of work sometimes to like resist that system and still, you know, like, stay true to that set of values. So that's something I'm constantly working on, but I think that's kind of an early part. But I think that the, which is related to what I'm going to say about Carolyn's part, about feeling at the table but not at the table. I'm learning very quickly that patriarchy still wins in this damn place. And that even, you know, like, even as, you know, like some of the contributions of people like Carolyn, you know, get erased by, like, patriarchy, like Black patriarchy, you know, like people's, like, comfort with men. And now it's becoming Black men. I love Adam Willie. You know, like, Adam Bledsoe and Willie Wright, but people are in love with them, you know, and like forget about all the Black women that are also alongside them, you know. So I think I'm concerned that that will become the pattern as there's room made for this kind of work to get done, that some of the systems will start to like replicate that continue to erase women. I say women, and I'm going to also include queer folks, non-binary people, trans folks into that conversation, which don't, you know, have the centering at all in any kind of way in this conversation. So I feel like I've accessed lots of things, and I feel like I'm at a lot of tables. We'll find out pretty soon if I'm on National Council, the AAG Council, but as another table, but there's, you know, like there's still like a lot of like kind of lower level things that happen, such as like, one of the struggles that I also have, and I'll shut up after this, is that a lot of conversations happen in rooms like this, and then people leave and forget all about them, and don't take them back with them and do the real struggle and hard work on their campuses and with other scholars and like with their parents and with whomever else to like really work towards developing or like envisioning new worlds and new ways of doing things. So I'm sure, yeah.
I guess I'll just say that I really struggle with this concept of being at the table. And my gut instinct is that I don't want to be at any table, and that I don't believe that the table is a structure which will liberate us. But at the same time, being really practical, like we need to be editors of journals, and we need to do these sorts of things that pave paths. But I wish that there was like a different way of being at the table that wasn't the table.
And with that said, I was going to say that, you know, going back to what I said about being like paralyzed with anger in my body and that kind of driving my research agenda, yeah, there are other ways of being at the table and not being at the table. And what I realized was that, you know, the anger that I had wasn't just for myself, but it was for every person of color, every racialized minority who can't be at the table because of the structural inequalities and how they play out in bioanthropology. So there are things that I enjoy doing with the privilege of tenure that don't involve having to be at the table. There's something I can do outside of the room and send somebody else to the table. So I mean, I think there are ways to maneuver, and that it's important to maneuver outside of the table in that way. Speaking to something LaToya said, I want to bring everyone's attention to a panel discussion that took place at the American Association of Physical Anthropology in 2017 that really focused on this issue of what does diversity, and not in a tokenist way, but race, class, gender, sexuality, physicality, what does this diversity bring to bioanthropology? And I think you can Google it and it will come up. I'll share the information. It can be put up on the DOPE website. And there are going to be some follow-up discussions. So there are those developments that are happening. Also, one really kind of fantastic, brilliant trans bioanthropologist, sociologist of medicine and biology named Shay Akil McLean. I'm saying his name on purpose, look him up. He has a fantastic website called Decolonize All the Things, and I'm happy to report that he went right all the things, and he got picked up and is a part of like a 20 or 30 minute interview on NPR. And so I think that, again, that visibility is really important and does signal some important change. More change needs to happen, but I think those are really important signals. And Shay was a part of the panel discussion in 2017 as well. And I believe the abstracts are online, and I think they'd be of real interest.
Thank you.
Dr. Priscilla was talking earlier about being visible in ways that don't engage with a white lens, and I don't want to misquote her, so sorry, I know I'm mentally reframing it a little bit. And I was wondering how it feels, or how it's changed your sense of visibility to be doing this with each other.
So how does it change our sense of visibility doing this with each other?
Aside from being on stage and being filmed right now. Well, I think it's interesting because, like, as Rosalind pointed out, we come from very different backgrounds, and but the ways that we're able to overlap and strengthen or further enunciate some of the frameworks in the world and practices that we see as significant to our ability to do what we do, I think is perhaps one way. Because we haven't been in conversation before. Rachel happened to come up to me on the plane yesterday because we got stuck in Atlanta for 3 hours. And then she was like, "Are you LaToya?" And it's also an awfully empowering moment, I would have to say, because so much of what we do is a lot of times isolating, or things that we do in areas that people don't see, and so being able to talk about them. I have talked about my background before and brought up pictures of my childhood and things like that, and then also the empty lot where my house used to be, and all those kinds of things. So I like thinking about how we overlap and amateur. So it would have been 20, which I think would have been, I mean, it's very clear, again, that we're like wanting to, I don't know, I'm going to stop because I'm rambling now.
Well, I think there's something to be said for, you know, the power of having a space in which we can be talking about Black placemaking and Black geography in this really interdisciplinary way. And, you know, that's something that is very important, again, obviously for many racialized minorities in bioanthropology, for instance, who cannot necessarily go to the physical meetings or meetings within their formal discipline and be seen because their stuff is considered to be from elsewhere. And so, you know, being in spaces like this where these kinds of threads of commonality are visible, I think are not only empowering to us, but to everybody here.
Yeah, I think for me, moments like this are extremely important to my career and my being. It's these situations that make me feel like I'm not ridiculous for doing what I do, and because I face a lot of isolation and people telling me that the way that I think or the way that I approach things is not anthropological or not XYZ, and so to sit up here with other people who don't require an explanation or validation feels wonderful. And if I didn't have these kinds of opportunities, I don't think that I would be where I wouldn't have a job. I mean, I wouldn't stay here.
I just say when I originally asked to, like when I was originally asked to be in the session as we go to whoever's next, I was like, Stephanie, can we have us in a black space? And I don't know like where the black space on campus is, but we're not in there. But we are like in a, or in Lexington, I guess. But you know, like we have to come into this building that has that WPA mural on the outside, and I hope that like people will engage with what's happening in the lobby and why, you know, these kinds of conversations continue to be important. You know, even within, like, having this kind of radical conversation and thinking about that, like, conjuring of an indigenous person as a savage who's going to come through the bushes and pillage the woman out there, go look at it, you'll know what I'm talking about. I think it's really, really important.
So, this is great. This is the best thing I've ever been to. But as a Black woman in geography, I always like question, you know, like, am I allowed to be here? Should I be here? Should I do something else? And something that Dr. Watkins mentioned was just that anger that you always feel. And like right now, I just submitted a paper on anti-blackness in Brazil, and I just get so angry reading all these readings talking about like the process of dehumanizing races of people, not just Black people, also Asian populations and things. And like, how do you? This is a loaded question. How do you deal with that anger and still do it every day?
I'm sorry, but I guess it's funny because you say that because I've been talking about anger all week, and I also like threw my phone earlier, so that if you missed me throwing my phone in the previous welcome address, then, you know. Anyway, so like, but I think that I taught in my class this week because Audrey Lord's birthday was Monday, and I taught uses of anger like kind of like organically while I was in class, because the use of anger is so important that, like as Audrey said, it's like to be angry about the structural oppression and dispossession and all of those things is really important, and then how you funnel that and use it as a source of power, I think is equally as important. I'm going to give you're getting a reading list today, all you fine people. Audrey Lorde, Uses of Anger, I think is important. There's also a TED Talk that came out in November that also talked about the uses of anger and like women not being able to show anger and like the kind of like the associations that come, particularly with, you know, for white women, it was like you're mad and then you go to the psychiatric ward. There's the angry black woman. There's the spicy Latino woman. There are like all these things that are associated with anger, like women's ability to use anger, and like, but if we like harness that kind of power and understand the necessity of anger to the intellectual production, I think, you know, that's why I laughed when you said that. Like, you're just so angry. And I'm like, yeah, we're angry all the time. You know? But I think there's, you know, ways to funnel that, which may come back to your point about, like, how do you write about these things? I think that's one of the, like, most brilliant things about bell hooks. People like bell hooks down the street, you know, at Maria, you know, like, she was like, I wanted to be a writer. And she writes about belonging at home and love and hate and racism and all these things. Just over and over and over and over and over, but she's found a way to do it in a way that feels right for her, and like the space that she comes from, and like how to teach about it and how to think about it, and why being in Maria is so important and not being anywhere else. She could be anywhere else. So yeah, I just wanted to. That's why I left.
I just wanted to ask an engagement access question. I mean, your work is really impactful and increasingly so within the academy. And yet it's written in kind of the father tongue, or it's written in the dialects of the academy and disseminated primarily through, you know, academic conversations and journals or at professional meetings. I'm just wondering if you could discuss the ways you have made or can make your work more accessible and usable within the life world that you write about.
I guess I'll take that one. I think I'll kind of fold in an answer to the previous question to it. So I have not been very good about writing for non-academic audiences. And part of that is a deliberate choice to protect my time. So, you know, I try to produce the research outputs that are necessary for me to not be fired from my job. And then I try to engage in things that bring me joy. And thus far, writing for non-academic audiences or doing activist work in that way has not felt like a joyful process, but has felt like more labor. So, you know, I'm not foreclosing the possibility maybe at some point in the future that could become a joyful process that I do alongside my job. But for now, I can't take on the additional labor. It's like a second shift. Yeah.
I'll add to that, again, kind of folding it into the previous question. You know, there's a particular knowing that comes out of anger. And that's, like I said, what really drives my intellectual political agenda. And there are things that I do, like I said, they don't have anything to do with academic work per se. Like I spend a good chunk of time going to speak to elementary, middle, and high schools, or bringing high school groups into my lab for an osteology primer. There's also work that I'm now doing with the Park Service that that is informed by, based on the way that I'm putting together the research design and the methods, by the ethical epistemology. So those are ways that I kind of consider, I see myself as seeking out. But again, I mean, I think it's we have to be very real about the fact that, I'm doing this because I don't have requirements for tenure and promotion at this point that create space for me that they don't yet have. And so the responsibility is on me, as I see it, the responsibility is on me to be doing that stuff. And not necessarily them. If, knowing that, I'm assuming you want whatever. I mean, there's the way that the matrix, I mean, this is the word.
I think that's interesting point because I was on the keynote plenary for the Feminist Geographies Conference 2 years ago at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and in my remarks there, I said, I keep questioning myself, if I was not in a faculty role or on a university campus, would I still be doing this work? And so I urge people to ask themselves that question, is this just about pursuing a career, or is this about creating change, thinking about inequality and about being publicly engaged and all of those kinds of things. And so I reflect on that and challenge myself to do those kinds of things. And I think on the tenure part, I'm in an interesting situation because I'm in a teaching institution that values teaching, and that their community is in our classrooms all the time. And we have open house for the community. We want to be publicly engaged. The university radio service has probably interviewed every faculty member about any obscure thing that they've done in their life. A photo they published on some website, 5 years ago, or anything like that. And so the public engagement piece comes from our campus media, who do a really good job of finding out things that we've been doing and trying to highlight it for the community to hear. And the other thing is I similarly also go into the community and involved in some organizations that are feminist oriented or justice oriented that help me vacillate and bring conversations into both arenas from the academy into the community and the community back to the academy. So I just want to mention that because that. What was that with the church choir hand? The choir director.
It's time. Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. If we can please give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to our moderator, Dr. Harris, as well as our incredible panelists, Dr. Watkins, Dr. Garth, and Dr. Eaves. As we make our way out, we're going to exit in that direction. The mural that Dr. Eaves was speaking about is just on this wall, so as you're leaving out, you will see the response to the mural, which is in the foyer as you're leaving Memorial Hall. And you're going to come out and go around to the Boone Center for the reception. As you get to the Boone Center, there are some foods for special dietary needs, vegan and gluten-free, that have been set aside at a separate table. So we ask that those without special diets to please wait until after 8 before serving yourselves from that table. We really appreciate you understanding, but please give our panel another round of applause.